Good evening. Happy Tuesday, fantasy football fans and IDP fans specifically. Welcome to Getting Defensive. We're getting started just a couple of minutes early tonight. Full disclosure, flying solo this evening. Jeff DiMatteo, founder of Gridiron Ratings and host of Getting Defensive. Here with you tonight, Ronnie Evans was going to join us, but he ended up being a late scratch. Turns out he's got some kind of stomach bug. Last anyone saw him, he was doing the Lamar Jackson waddle through the locker room trying to find a bathroom. So we're not going to see Ronnie tonight. I am actually a little under the weather also. A lot of allergies. I'm going to apologize in advance. There's going to be a lot of sneezing, a lot of pauses for sneezes, and I've got a whole stack of tissues here next to me to continuously wipe and blow my nose. So hopefully it doesn't ruin the show for you. We are going to stick right to nuts and bolts and things that you need to know this week. So what we're going to do is it's waiver night. Let's stick right to the waiver stuff. We're going to cover some key priority waivers at a bunch of different positions. We're going to try and keep this thing as clean as possible for you. But a couple quick notes just as we're kind of looking through things. Looks like Darius Shaq Leonard should be coming back any time now. Zaire Franklin could start to become less of a thing. But keep an eye on that Leonard injury. It sounds like he's been getting more and more work in. The hope is that they could see him as soon as week 3 or 4. As long as he's not playing, Franklin is a worthwhile fantasy player. Keep him in your lineup. So with that, let's go ahead and let's take a look at some waiver options for week number 3 here. What we're going to do is we're going to go in reverse, and we're going to start in the secondary. Excuse me. So a couple of guys you want to add. All of these roster percentages are based on MFL's ownership. So MFL's rostership numbers. So when I say guys 42% owned or 42% rostered, it's based on the MFL, My Fantasy League rostership numbers. And then any scoring I reference will be based on a balanced scoring mechanism. So we do have access to the tackle heavy and sack scoring. We're going to have that in a table for you on gridironratings.com in about an hour or so to make sure you're ready to go for tomorrow morning. I apologize it's so late getting up. But if you need that, feel free to ping us, hop on the chat on the site, ping us on Twitter, let us know. We'll get this stuff out to you as fast as we can. With that, let's start with safeties. Let's get right after it. So the number one safety we want to add this week, if you happen to need a defensive back, is Jaquan Brisker, Chicago Bears. This guy's our DB1 for waivers for the week. He's the guy we want. He's getting 100% of the snaps. Dude's not coming off the field. If you followed our rookie content on the Chop Shop or in Getting Defensive and you tracked any of the rookie scouting we had done on this guy, we referred to him as TRL, thin red line. He's that line between offenses getting first downs and defenses getting off the field. This guy is picking up more and more every week. He's making tackles. He's getting passes defensed. He's doing a little bit of everything. In balanced scoring, he's getting right now, you're talking about 14 points or so a week. Tackle heavy, he's at 15, so he's still getting those tackles going there. This is a worthwhile add. Feel free to plug him in a lot of leagues, depending on your scoring mechanism and who you already have. He could step right in and start for you. 42% rostered in MFL. Absolutely fantastic player. Love him a lot. Chicago has a high tackle opportunity. This is a team that hasn't been very good. Teams are running the football on them quite a bit. Obviously, the more run plays, higher tackle opportunity, and we're going to get the home stat crew numbers here in just another couple weeks, so we'll know what kind of additional tackles they're getting just by virtue of the Bears awarding as many or more tackles than other teams. So definitely something to be aware of. Jaquan Brisker, if you don't know the name already, you need to. He's number 9 for the Bears. He's number 1 in your waiver wire hearts this week. Safety number 2, or DB number 2 here, Detroit Lions, Deshaun Elliott. This guy is 26% rostered, not quite as sharp as Brisker in terms of, stacking up tackles and all that, but he's only about 1.5 points or so behind. The Detroit Lions are starting to get really salty up front. Malcolm Rodriguez is looking pretty good. We're going to talk more about him a little later. Aiden Hutchinson, the second pick in the draft, is really becoming a nuisance to opposing offensive lines, which is helping Charles Harris get after the passer even better. When you start getting a really nasty, salty pass rush like that up front, guess what? Defensive backs have more opportunities at big plays. Deshaun Elliott is going to be more of that big play guy in Detroit than probably anybody else they have back there. He doesn't necessarily stack up tackles the way Tracy Walker had a couple of years ago. but he gets enough to be relevant, and he can defend enough passes, and he can also pick off enough balls where this is a guy that's got a lot of upside moving forward. I'm going to add him this week if I need a guy on my roster for depth. I'm going to add him if I need a DB3 or 4 easily. Easily. I'm not sure I want him as a 1 or a 2 just yet. I'm not in that. Not there. We're not there. He's a waiver guy, right? Deshaun Elliott is a worthwhile add. You want to get him on your team because the situation in Detroit is only getting better. This is a situation where now Detroit is scoring about 30 or so points a week on offense. Teams have to throw to keep up. There's Deshaun Elliott making plays in the secondary. Go ahead and plug this guy in and be thrilled that you have him because there's a lot of upside there and you got him for nothing. Similar situation, similar story here. Lesser known guy for the Miami Dolphins, Eric Rowe. I mean, I know some IDP folks already know him. He's our safety 3 this week for the waiver wire. This is a guy that's only 15% rostered in MFL, getting about 12 points a week on a balanced format, which, is about the same on tackle heavy. It's about the same on sack heavy. Like, he's just getting you about 12 points a week. He's only getting 59% of the snaps. So this guy's rotating in and out with different sub packages. We like Rowe, but we don't love him. Kind of like the rest of the guys we're going to talk about. He kind of comes with a lot of, I don't say warts, but he needs a lot of help from his situation. He looked really good this past week in an absolute shootout. Teams are chucking the ball deep. Guess what? Safeties, corners, they start to get more opportunity to make plays, right? That's where Eric Rose really thrived. Miami's got Buffalo this week. Expect a shootout. There's going to be a lot of plays deep. I'm looking for Eric Rowe to pile in a few points. If you need a safety 3 or 4, go ahead and run that guy out there. Safety 4 for our waiver wire collection this week, Ron Kearse, Dallas Cowboys. Hey, this guy absolutely crushed last year, basically covering up for all Trayvon Diggs' blown coverages. That guy is trying to shoot for the ball. He gets burned. There's Kearse making a tackle. Well, we're seeing some of that already this year. If you're in a tackle-heavy format, we really like Kearse. He's already getting about 14 points a week in a tackle-heavy format. If you're going balanced format, you're probably not getting as much because he's only getting tackles. He's not getting you much else. So you're only looking at about 10 points a week in a balanced format. So something to be aware of there. We like Kearse. We don't love him. He's the 4th safety on the list this week. You're talking another guy gets about 2/3 of the snaps. Kind of comes off a little too frequently because he's flying all over. He needs to get a blow every now and again. The next 2 guys, the Jaguar safeties. We got Rayshon Jenkins and Andre Cisco. 23 and 14% owned respectively. Both guys are good for about 11 to 12 points a week. They both cover 100% of the snaps for the Jaguars. These are the starting safeties. They run more of a left-right safety, more so than a free strong safety. So both guys can get up in the box. Both guys can go deep. There's a lot of give and take there. Jenkins had the interception this week, hence his numbers getting bounced up a little bit. I kind of like Cisco better of the 2. Simply because I feel like I can count on him as a more reliable tackler. So Andre Cisco, if you're looking for a really deep shot, that could be a guy that can help you out and he can get you some tackles and you can plug him in and feel pretty good about him in the short term here. Let's see. The last safety that we've got is Pittsburgh Steelers' Terrell Edmunds. Edmunds is rostered in about 47% of MFL rosters. That's quite a few. This is another guy. He's a tackler, right? It's going to be him, Miles Jack collecting a ton of tackles. We hope you picked up Jack last week. But, this Pittsburgh defense looks a whole lot different with no TJ Watt. So expect Edmunds to see a little bit more of an uptick as more passes are suddenly being completed, especially in the intermediate space. But there's some short-term upside to having Edmunds in your lineup and on the field. If you're playing in a league that requires a cornerback, I generally don't play in a lot of these. I don't really care for them because cornerbacks are really, really fluky, right? I'm not really into it. So we'll try to keep these ones brief. There's one guy that stands out heads and shoulders above the rest, though. Raiders cornerback Nate Hobbs. Nate Hobbs is rostered in 22% of leagues. He's getting you about 20 points a week through the first 2 weeks. He plays 99% of the snaps. The guy doesn't come off the field. Here's the deal with Hobbs, though. He's not particularly good in coverage. It's a case of bad corner, getting targeted, getting a bunch of points because he's just running into points. He's getting tackles. Maybe he knocks away a pass. He just happens to make some plays. This is not a shutdown cover guy. That's why he gets targeted. So Nate Hobbs, good for fantasy, probably less good for the Raiders. With that, give me just one moment here. If you missed the intro, I'm dealing with some allergy problems, so I apologize for the sneezes and the nose wipes and all the things that are going to go with that tonight. But we're going to power through. Sticking with corners, we'll talk about a couple more guys. Derek Stingley for Houston, AJ Terrell, Darius Slay had a few picks. His numbers are a little inflated. I'm not that excited about Slay. Mike Hilton, Marlon Humphrey, all of these guys offer some tackle upside. All of these guys are still getting targeted. AJ Terrell, I expect his numbers to actually drop off because he's so good in coverage that I expect quarterbacks to kind of, get the gist of like why they stayed away from the back half of last year. He's probably going to end up losing value. He's 43% rostered right now. I actually expect that number to go down in the next 6 or 7 weeks as teams start to stay away from him. But Derek Stingley's a rookie. He's still being targeted quite a bit. I know he got nicked up in this last game, so it's worth keeping an eye on the injuries. If you need a corner, you can plug him in and just bury him on your roster and see how it goes. I do really like Mike Hilton and Marlon Humphrey, though. These are two reliable, savvy vets. Humphrey's always on the field, 89% of snaps. He gets you about 13 to 15 points a week. He's even better in tackle heavy, where he's more like 15 to 17. So keep your eyes on those guys if you happen to need corners. Now that we're through the least fun position for IDP, we're going to shoot through some linebackers. Now, just remember, we're going to have all this stuff on the site here shortly. Once I get wrapped up with the show here, I'm going to throw it on a table, and we're going to get it up on the strategy page on gridironratings.com so you can kind of shoot through the whole table. And we'll be doing this once a week. On Tuesdays, we'll start getting that table put out that has all the IDP waiver ads and guys you might want to get in and around your roster. We're taking into account things like, what's their rostership percentage? How many points are they getting in various formats? What's their snap rate? Who are they playing this week? Is it anybody that's decent? So all of that stuff matters, and we kind of take all of it into account. But without further ado, let's get to our favorite position for IDP, or at least second favorite, and that's linebacker. So I don't know how this guy even made the list here, but Ernest Jones is somehow only rostered in 49.94% of MFL leagues. Now, when I say that, I am adjusting this for the number of IDP leagues that are actually in MFL. So it's not 8.94% of all MFL leagues. It's just IDP. So still half of IDP leagues don't roster this player. That's insane to me. He's getting you between 17 and 20 points a week. He is a very reliable tackler. He's a very smart football player and an exceptional athlete. 68% of the snaps. He's not on the field all the time. He doesn't need to be. Fact is, when he is on the field, you're seeing him getting sandwiched in between some combination of Bobby Wagner and then one of the safeties steps into the box. It could be a safety. It could be a corner. We're seeing Jalen Ramsey get creeped up in the box a little bit. And then Ernest Jones is allowed to basically just read and react and get to wherever the ball's going. And that's why he's so efficient on a per snap basis. He's worth having on your roster. He plugs in. By the end of the year, we're talking about a low end linebacker 2, possibly a high end linebacker 3. With some more upside, right? If anything should happen to Bobby Wagner, Ernest Jones could see a ton of work in the middle. And as a young ascending player, he needs to be rostered in Dynasty, but in your redraft team, he offers a lot of upside. And if we start to see more of that in the early mid part of this season, he could definitely help guide your defense to a few W's this year. This next guy is one of my favorites. I love this guy coming out. Malcolm Rodriguez for the Detroit Lions. This guy's a converted safety. I love these guys because they're always a little more athletic. They're always a little better in coverage. They always use their hands really well. And that's something that as a linebacker, it's really underrated. How well do you shed a block in the open field? How well can you go ahead and use your hands to tie up a tight end and keep him from getting into his route without drawing a flag? Malcolm Rodriguez is only playing 2/3 of the snaps right now, but this guy's getting between 12 and 14 or so points per week. He's getting tackles. He's getting them in spades. They're allowing him to rush from time to time. This guy is all over the field. A lot of folks are going to be in on Alex Anzalone. Hey, 91% of the snaps, 13 to 15 points a week. I expect these numbers to start to get a lot closer by mid-late season. Malcolm Rodriguez is only rostered in 24.76% of MFL leagues. Meanwhile, Anzalone, 41%. People are going to start to catch on to this Detroit team. And they're going to say, hey, I need to get some more of these pieces because that D line, Harris and Hutchinson and those boys, they're putting so much pressure on the quarterback that the linebackers and defensive backs are now being allowed to really run around and make plays. Rodriguez is more athletic. I think Rodriguez has better instincts. This is a player that by the end of the season, his snap share will outpace Anzalone, and he's going to go ahead and get you a lot more fantasy production. I'm happy to go bid up and go get him right now in week 3. The next one here, now this one, people are going to look at me and be like, well, how did this guy make the list? I'm going with Willie Gay. Willie Gay, Kansas City Chiefs, I know he's suspended the next 4 weeks. That's actually why I'm willing to go ahead and spend 0 fab. Somebody's going to cut him. The second he hits the waiver wire, I'm going to add him, $0 fab, pop him on my roster, and I'm going to wait. This guy has been all over the field. He's an incredible athlete. You're talking between 17 and 19 fantasy points a week. He's on the field constantly, almost 83% of the snaps, only 37% rostered right now. Gotta love Willie Gay. Go get him. Stash him while he's suspended. Pop him into your lineup. A useful, worthwhile player. I know Nick Bolton's the guy, but Willie Gay is really useful too. Both guys can be really productive. Next up here, this is kind of more of a specialty ad. So the linebacker 4 for our waiver wire this week, Zaire Franklin. Franklin's been playing in place of the injured Shaq Leonard. Leonard's going to be back soon. You know, if you've got Leonard on your roster, you should already have Franklin, but Franklin's only rostered in 11.88% of MFL leagues. I don't know how that is. This is a 17 to 19 point a week player, locked in. He does really well in tackle heavy, balance scoring, and sack heavy formats. He's all over the field, getting 100% of the snaps, playing the weak side linebacker. This is a guy that's productive every snap. You need to have him if you've got Shaq Leonard. Even if you don't have Shaq Leonard and you're just really thin at linebacker, go take Franklin because Leonard's fighting a back injury, and it looks like it's a lower back injury. And it sounds like they did some work to a couple of his vertebrae in the lower back where it comes together with his hip. And we don't know what that strength is going to look like. We don't know what his range of motion is going to look like or his mobility. This could be a really rough comeback for Shaq Leonard, and Zaire Franklin may find his way back on the field. He should be rostered. Don't let him out there until we see Shaq Leonard come back at 100%. So get him on your roster, keep him there. Don't let him go. Number 5 at linebacker this week, Nicholas Morrow, Chicago Bears. This guy's rostered in 37% of leagues. This is another, 15-point plus week, a guy, 100% snap share guy. He's playing next to Roquan Smith. Now, the Bears are coming out, and they're lining up a ton of Morrow right next to Roquan Smith. And we're seeing guys like Jaquan Brisker, and we're seeing a little bit of Eddie Jackson. We're seeing some of these defensive backs sneak up into the box with those two guys. Now, Morrow isn't Roquan, right? He's not Brisker. He's not Eddie Jackson. He's not on that level. But what he is a magnet to the football. He's really good about tracking down ball carriers in space and being around the tackle, getting a lot of assisted tackles. So if he's around and he's getting those assists all the time, guess what? That's going to help perk his numbers up. And this is a guy where he's not sexy, but he's going to get you some productivity, and he's going to help hold you up during bye weeks, and he's going to help hold you up when you've got injuries. So Nick Morrow, really nice guy to have on your roster. Next up was a guy, a big sweetheart last week. Everyone was really into this guy, Divine Diablo. He's still only rostered in 33% of leagues, 16 to 22 points per week. This guy's a tackler, right? He goes out, he's getting a ton of tackles. If you're in a tackle-heavy format, he should be on your roster, locked in. Even with Denzel Perriman coming back from injury when he does, Diablo's still going to be worked into the rotation. He's a 97% snap share player. He's not going anywhere. Get him in your lineup, keep him there. You're good to go. Number 7, Alex Anzalone. We talked about Anzalone a little bit. He's getting some productivity right now. Basically, I'm only in on Anzalone if I can't get Malcolm Rodriguez and he happens to be sitting there. I want one of the two guys because, again, they're just solid dudes where they're not sexy. They're going to get you that 12 to 15 points a week. You're never going to be that excited about it, but you know what? They're going to keep you from losing a few weeks. They may not help you win, but they're going to keep you from losing. So let some of your better players propel you to the win. Alex Anzalone is a nice guy to help plug some of those holes in your lineup. We've got a few more linebackers here, and then we'll shoot on to edge, D-line, and interior D-line. Linebacker number 8, Jermaine Pratt. This guy, 49% rostered. Another guy, kind of like Anzalone, right? He doesn't get you a ton. He's not sexy. Only gets 71% of the snaps. He's not always on the field because he comes off on passing downs. Fact is, Jermaine Pratt is a guy where if it's a rundown, there's a very strong chance he's in on the tackle. You got to love that. That's, sometimes you have to play efficiency and you have to play positional football, and you have to think about, okay, hey, I want the role I don't so much, I need to get away from the player. I don't care if he's wearing a green dot. I don't care if he's in 100% of the snaps. I want guys that when they're in, they're making things happen. And Jermaine Pratt does just that. He's a great player that gets to the football and makes plays. That's how he gets you 14 points a week in tackle heavy formats. The next few guys, they're all kind of the same sort of player where they're going to need a little bit of help with their situation to kind of make some things happen here. We've got Quan Alexander, Dre Greenlaw. These two guys, relatively low owned. Quan in the twilight of his career. Dre Greenlaw, not an athlete. It's a couple of dudes that I'm just not that excited about. But if you're desperate for a linebacker, there's some names that you can plug in and hope for the best. Michael Walker from the Atlanta Falcons comes in at the 11th spot here tonight. This guy that's getting a bunch of points, 16 and a half or so a week. Here's the deal, though. When they get healthy at linebacker, he's going back to the bench. I'm not really that thrilled about what I'm getting out of Michael Walker. Jayon Brown, Vegas Raiders, last linebacker here. Jayon Brown is a guy that he was kind of thrust into action, at least more so with Denzel Perriman being out. I don't expect him to keep up a heavy rotation. He's at about 71% of snaps right now. A lot of that was buoyed by last week's numbers. I just don't see that happening. But again, if you're desperate, you need a player, go get Jayon Brown. Or if you lost Perriman, maybe you plug Brown in. When Perriman comes back, you can cut Brown and feel fine. That's linebackers. That's kind of the gist there. As we shoot through it this week, hey, Ernest Jones, Malcolm Rodriguez, Willie Gay, Zaire Franklin, Nick Morrow, Divine Diablo, Alex Anzalone, and so on and so forth. These guys are all the kind of guys you want to have on your roster right now to help you win the next several weeks. If you're playing with an edge, or if you have guys that, like if you're in sleeper leagues where you have linebackers that can also play D-line because they're edge players, like a TJ Watt or Micah Parsons have DL designations in sleeper. These are some guys you might want to target also. Uchenna Nwasu from Seattle. This is a dude, hey, he does a little bit of everything. When he was at USC, when he was coming into the league, he did a little bit of everything there. He played with the Chargers, and they couldn't really figure out how to deploy him. But Seattle's kind of got him opened up a little bit. 81% of the snaps, he's always on the field, and he plays, in the intermediate all the way to in the backfield. So he doesn't go deep necessarily, but he plays from the sticks to the backfield. You got to love that. 17-point-a-week type player on 81% of the snaps, only 27% owned. A lot of people just don't know his name. And that's a shame because he's a good football player. And he's really good for fantasy. He's a sneaky guy where it's like, if you're telling me you've got Matt Milano on your roster, I'd probably rather have Uchenna Nwasu. Because Nwasu probably has linebacker designation, and he's probably getting you that same 17 points, whereas Milano's probably getting you, 8 to 12. DL2, Preston Smith. I don't know how this guy is so low owned. I mean, you're talking 25% rostership. Another dude that's just kind of a sack machine, right? Playing for the Packers. You got to believe that offense is going to get right. And he and our next guy, Rashawn Gary, are both going to start getting into a point where they're hitting the quarterbacks, they're rushing quarterbacks, and they're starting to get more of that love. If you're playing with a designated edge, or if you have linebackers with DL designation, like on Sleeper, Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith, both worthwhile ads if you're already thin at the position, right? If you happen to have lost somebody, say you lost TJ Watt or something, you need a body to fill in, both these guys are definitely valuable players to get into. Josh Sweat, he's our number 4 edge player here. Josh Sweat is rostered in 39% of NFL leagues. He's going to go out there and get you double-digit points every week. He helped you with a sack this past week. He's definitely more useful in a sack-heavy format because they like to just pin his ears back and let him get after the quarterback. So got to love some Josh Sweat. He's fast. He's athletic. He's long. He can do some things. He's not as good as Montez Sweat, but you know what? At this point, if you're telling me you can get him for free off waivers, he's a worthwhile ad. You stick him on your bench. You plug him in for injuries. You plug him in for bye weeks. And you know what? He's not going to embarrass you. So you got to love some Josh Sweat. The next guy up might seem a little low for some people based on name recognition, but Randy Gregory. Excuse me one second. Randy Gregory comes to Denver with a little bit of fanfare, right? The idea was Randy Gregory, Bradley Chubb were going to form this duo, and they were both going to get after the quarterback, and it was going to be this just, a couple of game wreckers getting together. Well, Randy Gregory's been pretty quiet. He's been getting some tackles. He's not really getting any sacks yet. I know he was nicked up. He's still only seeing about 58% of snaps, right? So he's just not quite there yet. And some of this is due to injury, and I'm willing to concede that. However, this is a player that we need to see more out of. I'm willing to pick him up because I know the history and I know he's capable. But I'm not taking him with the intent to play him now or even in the next 2 or 3 weeks. What I want to do is I want to pick him up and I want to play him in the weeks where they play teams like the Raiders. They play teams like Kansas City, where it's going to be a shootout. A lot of points are going to have to get scored. There's a lot of passing. I want Randy Gregory getting after the quarterback, but you're probably going to have to roster him kind of early in the year. I would say at some point in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So definitely a guy worth looking at. Next couple of guys here are all kind of the same. We get into this group where it's like, okay, we're kind of through the guys that have a lot of upside. Dorrance Armstrong, Jerry Hughes, Danico Autry. These guys need some things to go right if they're going to get some fantasy points. I like all of the players, especially if I'm playing in a deeper league and I kind of need more bodies. I love them. I think they can go ahead and contribute. What I don't necessarily love is their ability to get tackles. These are all guys that specialize in getting after the quarterback, and they require that in terms of getting fantasy production. So if they're not getting sacks, they're not getting you much of anything. If they're not hitting the quarterback, they're not getting much of anything. So keep an eye on that. If you're in a sack-heavy league, I'd probably prioritize those guys over, a Randy Gregory. But these are functional players. Autry playing for Tennessee, it looks like, that team might have a much higher tackle opportunity than we were ready for this year. So maybe he can sneak in a few more tackles. Jerry Hughes playing for Houston. Hey, that's a better offense than people think. He's getting after the quarterback, kind of like Jonathan Greenard last year. We had the Texans D end going out and making some plays last year. Jerry Hughes is kind of keeping that tradition alive. But all these guys get, you're talking 44 to 55% snap share. Like, they just rotate too much to be reliable. The last guy we'll cover waiver-wise is an interior defensive lineman, and that's Daron Payne. Daron Payne is rostered in 49% of leagues. He gets you about 15 to 17 points a week. He had a sack last week to really buoy those numbers up a little bit. 83% snap share. This guy doesn't come off the field as far as D tackles go and IDLs go. I really love the player, especially when we know Chase Young is going to be back in about 2, maybe 3 weeks. When Chase Young comes back and you've got Montez Sweat screaming off one side, we get Chase Young back in the groove on the other side, and you've got Jonathan Allen next to him. That fearsome foursome is back. The Commanders are nasty up front at that point. It's hard to not love these guys. Some folks will say, well, Chase Young's going to steal the productivity. Not so fast. Chase Young is good if he's isolated on a tackle. If they're going to double and triple team him to try and keep him away from the quarterback, that means that Daron Payne is likely going to be isolated on a guard or even a center in most pass rush and even run blitz situations. He's strong enough and big enough that he can win those one-on-one isolation battles, and he can find himself in the backfield making a bunch of plays. So if you're playing with an IDL, Daron Payne is a worthwhile add. That's the only IDL I want to talk about, because as I dug through them, I didn't really love most of them. So in review, we like Daron Payne. We went ahead and we covered a ton of linebackers already. We like Uchenna Nwasu, who's kind of that favorite edge player. We like Josh Sweat, Preston Smith, Rashawn Gary. I'm going to have all these players in a table listed in the strategy section of gridironratings.com later this evening. Probably as soon as I get off the show, I'll get cracking on that. We are going to cut this one a little short tonight, so I can work on that, so you guys can have all the information you need ready for Waiver Wire Wednesday here, so you guys can have all your ads ready to go. Looking ahead, next week, we're going to start covering a little bit more team defense, start talking more about, home stat crew, tackle discrepancies. We're going to start talking more about tackle share and pressure rate of what we're actually seeing now. The 2022 season, after 3 games, we have enough data that we can start to piece together what these teams are, and we can start to make those moves. Week 4, week 5, we'll start talking about trades and how to really fill your roster out for IDP and how to make those moves long term. So I hope you guys will stick around and come back for those episodes. I know this one was a little short. It's really tough flying solo here. Our co-host Ronnie will be back with us next week. Like I said, he hit the late scratch. He's a little inactive this weekend. Last we saw, he was doing the Lamar Jackson jog down to the toilet. We hope he's okay. With that, I'm your host, Jeff DiMatteo. This has been Getting Defensive. If you have questions, pop them in the comments. Reach out to us on the video. Hit the like and subscribe button. I want to help you out on chat. I want to help you out in the comments. Ping me on Twitter at NFL_DiMatteo. Ping Gridiron Ratings at Gridiron Rating. No S on that, just Gridiron Rating. On Twitter, we're going to be happy to help you out. Tune in Thursday for Next Man Up. Get all your injury updates. And Saturday, if you're playing DFS, check out the slate. With that, I wish you nothing but luck in week 3. I hope you win all of your matchups and, go ahead and crush all your IDP leagues. Thanks a lot. Take care.